Do you want to look like this? Well, you've come to the right video. We'll talk about PvP as well as PvE for Thief. I cannot speak Russian, so if you can get anything out of this video, I hope you get a better understanding of Thief. Alright, the first thing I want to go over is PvP, which is my favorite, as you can see obviously. Thief uses almost every single ability within his kit for PvP except for one, and that would be this one right here, the Shadow Strike. As you can see right here, Shadow Strike is extremely long in its animation. That's why I tend to not use it for PvP. For PvE, well, I wouldn't really recommend it, but that's for a later video, maybe. The first animation cancel I kind of want to talk about is the SIP. And the SIP is probably the best animation cancel tool you could possibly have, because you can use it in between moves, such as this. As you can see, it's been used. But it can also be used like this, for extra survivability against a target. The next animation cancel I want to talk about is Sabotage. Now you're kind of thinking, why in the world there'd be an animation cancel for Sabotage? And the answer is simple: for extra damage in between combos. Now look at this. If I were to throw a net, maybe distract a bit, you can see when I use Sabotage, it's a huge animation cancel, so I can use a couple abilities before it goes off, right? And that will lead to extra damage, which could mean a lot if you want to kill a target. If you saw beforehand, I kind of used another animation cancel that I'll talk about a tiny bit later, but I want to kind of touch on the Sabotage. The Sabotage can be used with basically everything. Like if you want to use it for sudden strike, for leaping, for chasing, you can basically use it for everything. That's why it's a really good tool to use. Alright? And when I go over my build, you'll understand why I use it so much. And another animation cancel would be the Massacre and the Gold Lust, as I use in the beginning of every combo. Right? I start with a net, a distraction, right? And I use both of them at the same time, right? So I get the casting time, and then I go into another animation cancel like this. Right? And this is extremely strong against weak opponents. Maybe like Thief, Thief, and like Sins, like Hunters, right? And like Snipers. It's like really effective versus them. I wouldn't really do a Warlock because Warlocks are pretty tanky, but if you can get one off and they're pretty weak, you'll win. Alright, let's talk about my build. As you can see, my dodge is pretty weak for a normal build and my hit is about average, but my HP is pretty high though. Alright, we'll talk about the talents first though. You probably already know or have like an idea of why it's like this, because, you know, for obvious reasons. Now, the reason my build is like this is because I have cards most people don't really have. Like, for example, Archon, right? Or Hugo for survival, right? And for sustain. Oh, well, I don't have all the great cards, but I have decent, alright? And I got Devourer, right? Got GC, got RGs, AB, right? I got a fairly normal build for Thief. And the way to make me maximize my damage output is by using 2 rows filled, right? I kind of want to use Dirty Fight for longer CCs, Red Hot Weapon to stack more stacks that'll be used for Sucker Punches. I want to use Blinding because it gives me basically a lot more survivability in terms of dodge, even though it's pretty low. And it also stacks for Sucker Punches. I'll use Campfire, well, because I kind of want to get here anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But if you wanted to use that for jumping 4 times, In terms of PvE, it is really good, but for PvP, it really doesn't matter. You want to use Painful Wounds because, as you can see, it says Poison and Bleeding deal more for double strike, which could be a really strong move if you have a DK or tier that they say here for Russians. And Mass Intoxication is used to stack Poison, which is also good for Sucker Punches, right? And then Massacre. All this right here is used for stacking this, which just means you can one-shot somebody if you're really good at it. Alright, and let's go into fighting. This one is kind of like, Meat Grinder is kind of like Painful Wounds. So it just gives you more damage for double strike. Butcher really goes really well with Massacre because it stacks bleeding, obviously, and it gives you 10% more damage. Now, the reason I would say Thief hits so hard is because of Cutthroat. It gives you plus 5 PvP damage. Well, if you see mine's, it's 164, which is 2 Dengers, well, 3 Dengers worth, which is a lot of damage, right? And Swasher, that's a weird one to say, but it increases your direct damage by 15%. Every time you slash, lunge, a double strike, or a sudden strike, it increases by 5%, which also allows you to deal a lot more damage. Now, the reason I'm using Cold Blooded over Vortex of Strikes is because for Cold Blooded, as I start stacking Archon right here, there's something called Immobilization, right? And if you read Cold Blooded, if they're stunned or immobilized, it increased my damage by 10%, which, yes, again, increases my damage. Now, I don't really like using Weapon Throw, but I do use it because I have a really good support, and I kind of rely on this to do that extra bit of damage. But if you don't want this, I would suggest using Deep Freezing because a longer CC can go a long way in a combo, especially with a team of 3v3 for arena, right? And then let's go up to Thievish Tricks, which is just does more damage for lunge and sudden strike. Now, the reason I said earlier in the video about the sabotage is because when I use this talent right here, that sabotage does 3 vulnerability, which increases my damage by 9. So if I use it in between a combo, I get an additional 9% increase in damage, as well as a tiny bit of damage from sabotage itself. Alright, and then these two don't really matter because Thief naturally does not have stealth like Sins or Assassins per se. And then Sucker Punch is the main reason why Thief hits so hard. So if you're wondering why Thief hits so hard all the time, it's because the more you stack like this, the more stacks you see, the more damage he deals, right? And that is for my build. But then again, I'm gonna say this again: if you do not like Weapon Throw, use Deep Freezing. Deep Freezing is really good if you have a really strong party, because it's for longer CCs, which allows them to use Purifying Crystals or Aqua, right? And it can make you win a battle very easy. But there's another reason why a lot of thieves use Deep Freezing over Weapon Throw, and that's because the longer the CC, the easier it is to win in a 1v1. So if there's somebody you want a 1v1 as a thief, Deep Freezing is the way to go. And I would recommend using Weapon Throw if you love playing with other people like me. That is it for the basic understanding of my favorite class, Thief. I'll showcase arena clips where I use Weapon Throw in arena, and I'll show 1v1 clips using Deep Freezing, and of course 1v1s. I'll say this now: I'm a PvP player for fun, so watch these clips with that in mind, and I hope you have just as much fun as me.
Каждый день на своей волне. Dead and sexy,